The story begins in the shadow of an unforgiving city where bright lights and broken promises exist side by side, a place where dreams are bought and sold as easily as debts are made. In this world, a young boy named Aiden, barely 12 years old, was making a name for himself as a rising child actor. His innocent face and natural talent had already won him roles in commercials and small film projects, enough to spark whispers that he might one day become a star. But behind his success, unseen by the public, stood his older sister, Elena, who had practically raised him since their parents passed away in an accident. At only 19, she was more parent than sibling, juggling school, part-time work, and the endless responsibility of protecting her little brother. She had promised herself that Aiden would never feel the emptiness of being alone, even if it meant she had to sacrifice her own dreams. Their uncle, Victor, had slipped into their lives shortly after their parents' deaths, presenting himself as a savior when in truth he was nothing more than a leech. A man in his 40s, sharply dressed but always with a nervous glint in his eye, Victor was drowning in mob debts from years of gambling and shady business. He saw Aiden not as a boy but as an asset, a tool to pull himself out of trouble. At first, his involvement seemed harmless, helping Aiden find auditions, driving him to sets, speaking with agents. Elena thought perhaps, despite his reputation, he wanted to be part of their lives. But it soon became clear that every paycheck from Aiden's work was going straight into Victor's pocket, vanishing into the hands of dangerous men who lurked in alleyways and smoke-filled bars. Elena noticed the signs early. The late-night phone calls Victor tried to take in private, the bruises on his knuckles, the way he flinched at every knock on the door. One evening she overheard him arguing with someone on the phone, his voice strained as he promised that the kid has another job coming up, the money's guaranteed. Her stomach dropped. It wasn't Aiden's future Victor cared about, it was his own survival. When she confronted him, Victor's smile was as slick as oil, assuring her that everything he did was for Aiden's career. "Don't you want him to be famous? To have the life your parents dreamed for him?" he asked, but Elena saw through him. She began to secretly save money, terrified of what might happen if Victor lost control. Her fears came true sooner than expected. The mob's demands grew louder, and Victor found himself backed into a corner. The boys' earnings were not enough, not fast enough, and threats began to seep into their lives like poison. Elena found a strange man lingering outside Aiden's school one afternoon, pretending to smoke but staring too intently at the children. A note was slipped under their apartment door, nothing but a drawing of a stick-figure child with a chain around its neck. Elena's blood ran cold when she confronted Vict. In the weeks following Victor's downfall, Elena tried to adjust to the strange quiet that now filled their lives. For so long every day had been driven by fear, performance, and the threat of discovery that the sudden absence of danger felt unreal. She would wake in the middle of the night expecting to hear Victor's voice on the phone, or footsteps pacing outside their door, but there was only silence. Aiden, though free from his uncle's grip, had been shaken by the ordeal. He no longer bounced around auditions with the carefree joy he once had. Instead, he clung to Elena, wary of strangers, mistrusting anyone who showed too much interest in his talent. She tried to reassure him, reminding him that his gifts belonged to him alone, that no one could take them away again, but she could see the shadow lingering in his eyes. Elena herself was haunted by what she had done. Though Lara and her team had protected her from legal consequences, the weight of the lies she told could not be erased so easily. She would walk past a magazine stand and see Lara's face on the cover, the same glittering smile she had worn while pretending to be her, and her stomach would twist. At times she wondered if she had lost her own identity in the process. The applause, the cameras, the flashes, it had felt intoxicating in fleeting moments, even as she hated herself for it. Now, away from that world, she struggled to find where she truly belonged. She was no longer a schoolgirl, no longer just Aiden's sister, no longer the counterfeit version of a superstar. She was something in between, undefined, and the uncertainty gnawed at her. Despite her desire for peace, trouble had a way of lingering. The mob was weakened but not gone. Men who had once circled Victor like vultures now looked for new debts to collect, and some of them remembered Elena. A few whispers reached her ears, questions about whether she might still be useful, whether her uncanny resemblance to Lara could be exploited again. Lara herself had warned her that the industry was full of people who saw identity as a commodity, a mask to be worn and discarded. Be careful who you trust now, the singer told her one afternoon, when they met briefly under the guise of closure. Elena nodded, but inside she wondered if she would ever feel safe again. At the same time, new opportunities began to surface. Aiden was offered a fresh role in an independent film, one that promised to showcase his talent without exploiting him. Elena hesitated, unsure if returning him to that world was wise, but he surprised her by insisting he wanted to try. Acting is still mine, he said firmly. Not Uncle Victor's. Not the mob's. Mine. His determination moved her, and she agreed to support him, vowing this time to guard his career with everything she had. In a strange twist, her brief and unwanted brush with fame had taught her how to spot manipulation, how to sense the sharks circling beneath smiles. She would never let Aiden be. It was far more suffocating than she had imagined. At first, it seemed almost manageable, a handful of appearances arranged by Victor, quick photoshoots in dimly lit studios where no one looked too closely, staged interviews where the questions were pre-arranged, and shady managers eager to pocket their cut without asking too many questions. But soon the requests multiplied. People wanted Lara everywhere, at exclusive clubs, at charity galas, at surprise pop-up performances. Victor, driven by greed and desperate to keep the mob at bay, pushed her harder each day. Just one more event, he would say, promising that this would be the last. Yet there was always another. Each time she walked into a room as Lara, her heart pounded with fear that someone would see through her disguise. She learned how to smile the exact way Lara did, how to tilt her head when photographers shouted her name, how to carry herself with the air of a superstar who belonged in every spotlight. But behind her carefully painted face, her hands trembled. The deception began to bleed into her personal life. Friends at school noticed her sudden absences and asked questions she couldn't answer. Aiden, too young to understand the full scope, believed the glamorous outfits and late nights were part of something magical, something that would make their lives better. Elena couldn't bring herself to tell him the truth. She let him think she was doing something heroic for them, even though each light chipped away at her soul. The worst part was the paranoia. Every time she walked into a crowded room, she felt eyes on her, searching for flaws, for cracks in her disguise. The real Lara was still out there, performing with Katseye, traveling across continents, dazzling millions. It was only a matter of time before someone noticed the inconsistencies, the impossible overlaps in schedules. The mob, meanwhile, was never satisfied. Each payment bought only temporary relief. Men in dark suits began appearing at the edges of her performances, their presence a constant reminder that failure meant danger. Victor grew reckless, flaunting their success, gambling again with money that wasn't his to spend. Elena begged him to stop, to think of Aiden, but he only sneered. Do you think I'd be alive right now if it weren't for you pulling this off? You should thank me for giving you purpose. The words cut deep. She wasn't living her own life anymore, she was drowning in his lies, trapped in a role she had never asked for. Inevitably, the facade began to crack. A gossip blog published side-by-side photos of Lara at a concert in Tokyo and Elena at a private party in New York on the same night. The headline asked whether Lara had a secret twin. Fans flooded social media with questions, dissecting every detail of her appearance. Some thought it was a stunt for publicity, but others weren't convinced. The whispers grew louder, and soon even industry insiders